The greatest paradox in world history. What if the single worst catastrophe humanity ever faced was actually the reason the modern world was born? In 14th century Europe, people experienced hell on earth. In just a few years, between one-third and one-half of the entire population was wiped out. This was the Black Death, or the Plague, named for the dark spots that appeared on the skin of the dying. The medieval order collapsed. Cities were choked with corpses, and people were driven to madness. It truly looked like the end of civilization. But the irony of history begins right here. In today's video, we will reveal how this terrifying plague forced Europe to change for the better, uncovering the three paradoxical truths that paved the way for the modern-age laborer liberation, the awakening of the individual and the spread of knowledge. Our first paradoxical truth: the plague used the power of the worker to crush the power of the aristocracy. Before the plague, medieval Europe was dominated by feudalism, specifically the system of serfdom. Serfs were peasants bound to the land. They couldn't move or even marry without the permission of their lord. It was essentially a form of servitude. But when the population plummeted, what happened? A massive labor shortage? The feudal lords panicked. They didn't have enough people to farm their vast lands, and without labor, they starved. Meanwhile, the value of the surviving peasants skyrocketed. They realized, if I run away, I can get higher wages and better terms elsewhere. If a serf decided to leave, the lord had no choice but to negotiate. To keep their land productive, lords were forced to offer higher wages and, crucially, personal freedom. The plague, acting as a force of economic necessity, abolished the harsh system of serfdom. Wealth flowed from the aristocratic elite down to the common citizens. This sudden boost in consumer spending laid the foundation for the economic development that would later flourish. The second irony: the plague shattered the authority of God and the Church, awakening the individual spirit. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church held absolute, unchallenged authority. The life and thoughts of every European were centered on the Church's teachings. But when the disease struck, prayers did nothing. Even worse, many clergy members abandoned their flocks, fleeing the plague or succumbed to it themselves. This led to a profound question: if we pray so hard, why has God abandoned us? The massive failure of the Church to save people caused faith to waver. People started relying less on divine authority and more on their own reason and experience. The sudden, chaotic reality of death also gave rise to the concept of memento mori. Remember, you must die. This shift in focus from the afterlife to the preciousness of life here on earth took root. This focus on human beings, instead of just God, became the core idea of humanism. It created the fertile ground in which the Renaissance, a rebirth of classical art, philosophy, and learning, would soon blossom. The final, most impactful irony: the plague accidentally opened the door of knowledge to the common people. Before the plague, knowledge was closely guarded. Education and scholarship were conducted almost exclusively in Latin, a language only spoken by the elite, like priests and scholars. When the plague killed vast numbers of teachers and intellectuals, the universities faced collapse. The surviving educators were forced to teach their remaining students in the local vernacular or common language: English, French, German, etc. This was a massive shift. Specialized knowledge began to be written and taught in the languages people actually spoke. Soon after, the printing press was invented. Knowledge was now in the common language and could be mass-produced cheaply. The control that the Church and the elite once had over information simply vanished. Empowered by accessible knowledge, ordinary citizens stopped blindly following the Church. They began to think, I want to read the Bible myself and know the truth. This intellectual awakening was the final spark. It directly led to the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, the ultimate movement that ended the medieval era forever. The Black Death was a horrible, dark chapter in human history. Yet by violently destroying the Middle Ages' rigid system, serfdom, church authority, and the monopoly on knowledge, it cleared the ground. It created the very space necessary for the concepts of freedom, individual worth, and education to flourish. The plague, tragically, forced humanity into the modern world. History teaches us that crises and tragedies often lead to unforeseen, dramatic leaps forward. As we face modern challenges, we must recognize the potential for disruptive change and be prepared to build something new from the wreckage. What are your thoughts on this dark turning point in history? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.